Hello and welcome to Agri History. In this episode, we'll cover the domestication of cannabis. So if you're interested in cannabis and are a user, feel free to smoke your favorite herb and blaze while listening to this podcast. 420, or if the area you're in is still criminalizing marijuana, ignore the last advice, and in fact, ignore it altogether. Drugs are bad, okay? So just sit back and enjoy the history and domestication of cannabis. The main strains of cannabis, as well as the subspecies, diversified from many different areas. For instance, Cannabis sativa, subspecies sativa, originated in Europe and then diffused into the New World from that area. This strain was used mostly for fiber and seeds. Cannabis indica, subspecies chinensis, was also used for that purpose, although it was mildly psychoactive. It originated from East Asia and spread to Europe and the New World from there. Cannabis indica, subspecies indica, came from the Southeast Asian area, and from there diffused into the Middle East, Africa, Europe, and the New World. This subspecies is used for psychoactive properties. The subspecies of indica, called Afghanica, was bred in Afghanistan and diffused into Europe and the New World as a drug. Then there's the Sinsemilla Cultivars, which are bred from the above two subspecies. These cultivars were bred in the New World and then diffused worldwide afterwards. Cannabis has been used as a multi-purpose plant species since ancient times. The bark being used for cords, the stems used for textiles, as well as paper, and minor building materials / bedding. The seeds have been used for animal food as well as human food, and the female flowers have been used for herbal remedies as well as recreational drugs. And in recent years, it's been used for making plastic and paint. Since cannabis's beginning relationship with humans, there has been created strains of different subspecies, each selected for a different purpose, such as strains for textile, seeds, and recreational use. It is this process that created the land races we see today. The differences in the wild forms versus the domesticated forms of cannabis are quite stark. For instance, wild cannabis has multicolored, more camouflaged seeds that are smaller than the average domesticated cannabis plant. Our domesticated cannabis plant has non-shattering, pale-colored seeds. There are also stark differences between cultivars of fiber hemp versus seed and drug hemp plants. Fiber strains and land races produce plants with larger internodes and fewer branches, even when grown in open environments, while the seed and drug varieties have shorter internodes and more branches. Drug land races produce 5 to 20% THC, while European hemp cultivars contain less than 0.3% THC. In the 16th and 17th century, seed land races of cannabis were naturalized in North America. These types were the only hemp grown in North America until the 1890s, when Japanese hemp was introduced to California, and Chinese hemp into Kentucky. These were used as fiber plants for many years. The descendants of the Chinese imports became known as Kentucky hemp. These were used to breed further improved fiber hemp plants by the beginning of the 20th century. Unfortunately, the Japanese strains of fiber hemp disappeared prior to the 20th century, and these improved Chinese forms of hemp disappeared between the 20th century and modern day, although feral offspring of these Chinese cultivars still remain. During the 20th century, breeders improved native land races through crossbreeding their own native land races with cultivars from foreign lands, such as Mediterranean and Russian cultivars. All this crossbreeding and refining of the breeding practices continued, and now most of our European hemp cultivars are monoecious in nature. It is from these lines that the French cultivar Fibremont was made. Many of our current fiber hemp plants are made from Fibremont. Although the fiber plants known as Carmagolia and its descendants Fibernova, Letta Campana, and Superfibra are virtually extinct. This lineage has been used to breed many of our European and American hemp varieties. These Italian land races and breeds were bred from the Chinese subspecies of Sativa. These cultivated varieties, alongside German varieties of hemp, were used in the breeding of Fibremont. Most of our present-day European varieties of hemp share a common ancestor. Most of the European fiber cultivars of Europe are descended from Carmagola and Fibremont. In Ontario, most of our hemp varieties are European in origin, and as such have the same ancestors. In the 20th century, most marijuana plants were bred by identifying female plants with favorable traits and separating them from male plants until they are grown to a physical size where they can be pollinated with a favorable male plant with proper traits, and then continue crossbreeding between these two lineages and field testing the progeny of these crosses to make sure that these traits remain stable. Much of this process happened in the criminal black market during the 20th century, using small populations with high numbers of successful plants. These breeding practices also relied on hobby breeders as well, in a very decentralized union between different groups. The Sinsemilla Cultivars were a crossbreed between Cannabis Indica Subspecies Indica and Cannabis Indica Subspecies Afghanica. This process started in the 1970s when breeders removed all the male plants from Indica subspecies lines and replacing them with males of the Afghanistan subspecies of cannabis. This resulted in the first Sinsemilla Hybrids, the most potent drug cannabis ever made. These hybrids were made three ways. The first way is through an initial crossbreeding between the two lineages, followed by continued inbreeding via crossbreeding with their siblings to fix the traits. The second method is same as the first, only they did a lot of crossbreeding with one of the parent populations to fix the traits, i.e. continue crossbreeding with the seed parent or the pollen parent. The third way was further crossbreeding with a brand new strain unrelated to both lineages of Afghani and Indica origin. Now to talk about the Afghanistan Cultivars. The Afghan cultivars of cannabis were introduced to North America in the late 1970s and through the 1980s. These cultivars stood only 2 meters tall at maturity and were very well branched and had darker green leaflets with broader leaves. These plants were used in crossbreeding because of their potency and high psychoactive compound yield. By the 1980s, there is very few pure-blooded Afghan or Indica cultivars. Most had become hybrids of some sort. In the 80s, marijuana was moved into an indoor crop, and further breeding for higher potency Afghan Indica hybrids became in vogue. This reduced genetic diversity of marijuana by a considerable margin. This concludes our video on cannabis domestication. Stay tuned for the final season of Agri History and future updates on the fate of this channel, where we will go into new side series, such as Agri History Revisited, Agri History Tropical Edition, and hopefully the Agri History Podcast. So stay lit, fam.